We've just learned about $400 million ransom payment. Same day, just a coincidence, right? Cash.
We do not pay ransom. We didn't here, and we won't in the future. Precisely because if we did, then we would start encouraging Americans to be targeted.
Donald Trump and President Obama sharply at odds over this week's revelation about that $400 million cash payment to Iran last January. And we're back now with the panel. Well, George, when is $400 million in cash flown in an unmarked cargo plane with 4 American hostages sitting and waiting on the tarmac? When is that ransom, and when is that a coincidence?
Well, to use the term du jour, the optics are not good, because as you described them. Senator Cotton said the whole $1.7 billion was ransom, so he thinks there's no legal claim, I gather. He's a lawyer, deriving from a 1970s Shaw-era arms deal that never was consummated. There is, however, a difference between what looks scandalous and what is actually a scandal. The cash makes it look terrible, because the only reason to want cash is to make it untraceable. They could have done all this without the plane, without the pallets full of currency.
Simply well, now, wait a minute. I mean, because the president says the reason they had to do cash was because of the fact that we have all these banking restrictions and the sanctions, and if we had tried to do it through a wire, they couldn't have gotten it.
It seems to me they could have found a way to digitally bounce it off somewhere. I mean, this is a way of evading the letter of the law, and they could have evaded it in some other way. What struck me as passing strange in the piece we just showed is Mr. Brennan saying, well, they're using this money for infrastructure, child care, for all I know. Money is fungible. You give a nation $400 million, that's $400 million.
They actually get, I mean, they've given them over $100 billion.
Sure,
right.
That's money that they can use for something else.
We asked you for questions for the panel, and we got a bunch like this one. Don James tweets, can there be any legal repercussions against POTUS, President of the United States, for ordering what is obviously ransom? Jerry, how do you answer, Don?
I don't think so. You know, lawyers are enmeshed in all of this, but I think the nub of the matter, and what you discussed with Senator Cotton, is this Iran's money or is this American money? In the view of the administration and most lawyers, this is Iran's money. It goes back to a 1979 deal in which the Iranians bought under the Shah some fighter jets that were never delivered. The rest of it is supposed to be interest on that unpaid amount of money that's been sitting in escrow ever since. So, you know, if it's not taxpayers' money, it's hard to see what the recourse is. If it is taxpayers' money, then you have a different situation. But I think that the issue here is not so much the payment, which, as you noted, the president announced. It's the manner and timing of the payment. And underneath all that is a much bigger issue, which is a part of this effort to clear the decks with the Iranians, the nuclear deal, the Americans held hostage, and this money, is that going to produce some change in Iranian behavior? Or is this simply a case in which they're going to pocket what they have and then move on to the next attempt to get more out of it? That's the real question that hangs in the air here.
Lisa, Lerer, what makes this even harder for the Obama administration to argue is that one of the hostages, Pastor Seib Abedini, this week said that they were sitting there on the plane waiting to leave after years of captivity, waiting to leave Tehran for hours while they were told that they were waiting for another plane to arrive. Here is the pastor.
Everyone was ready that we leave the country. They said we are waiting for another plane, and until that plane doesn't come, we never let you go.
How worried is the Clinton campaign that somehow this washes up on Hillary Clinton and her stewardship of foreign policy with Barack Obama and becomes a campaign issue?
Well, frankly, it's not something they've talked about much in the past week since it sort of became a national issue. She has dismissed it as old news, saying that this was something that was publicly announced and that she's very supportive of the nuclear deal and thinks that's the right approach, and she'll be very tough in enforcing that deal. I think when you talk to Clinton advisors privately, they say that this underscores how Donald Trump is really not fit to be commander-in-chief, and they point out several things that happened, which is that he essentially made up facts about this deal. There was no video, as he later admitted. Hillary Clinton he said that he sort of blamed her for the whole negotiation. That's not quite true. She was out of the State Department for 18 months, and as George points out, this is a case that dates back to the 70s. And, you know, of course, he claimed to have seen these payments happening that he just didn't see, and he claimed it was secret. It wasn't secret. It was announced on January 17th. So advisors and surrogates...
Not the $400 million in the unmarked cargo plane, though.
Right, right. But the fact that this agreement the settlement had been reached. So advisors are really focusing on that he made up facts, and they have some basis for that. You know, the Post did an analysis of his description of the video, and they said that he said 9 untruthful things in 300 words. So that, you know, that is a concerning attribute in a commander-in-chief, and that's really what they're focusing on when they talk about this.
The interesting thing about that, Lisa, is that just after Trump seemed for one of the rare times to walk back and say, well, no, actually, I didn't see video of the cash arriving in Tehran. I saw the hostages get off a plane when they were freed from Iran. There was an Iranian documentary which seemed to show cash coming off pallets off a plane. So maybe there really was a video, although Trump apparently didn't see it.
Right. Well, I don't think he did a good job explaining that clearly. But look, to Senator Tom Cotton's point, you know, what he was pointing out is, look, it doesn't matter what the Obama administration is saying. It doesn't matter what they believe to be the truth. What matters is the perception of the Iranians and other bad actors in the country. And I think that is the big problem here, is that Iran has used this in propaganda video. You look at their own military as saying that it was a ransom deal, and they're pointing at the weakness of the Obama administration as a result. And I think what this does is that, you know, regardless what the details are, the perception of it is a ransom deal. And I think it continues to undermine what has been, you know, an embarrassing sequence of events since implementation of this deal. You have just 2 weeks after the deal, Iran put 10 U.S. sailors on their knees, pointed guns at their head, and shot it as video and used that as propaganda. We also looked at in March after the deal, Iran shot their third ballistic missile that flies in the face of international law. You look at in April, the U.S. made the unprecedented purchase of heavy water, you know, for nuclear purposes. And you go to June and May, where we had Ben Rhodes admitted to lying about the deal, deceiving the American public. And as in June, the Obama administration doctoring video, trying to give the illusion that they didn't lie about the deal in the first place. And then we also have go to June, where the State Department once again declared the fact that Iran is the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. So we've seen, you know, time after time since the implementation of the deal, one embarrassment after another, which undercuts the deal, undercuts the Obama administration on foreign policy, as well as Hillary Clinton as an extension.
I think you bring up a very good point, and let's get to that, Jerry, which is, forget the deal. I mean, we're going to forget about the $400 million over the course of the next couple of months. But the whole question of engaging Iran, and Hillary Clinton was clearly an architect of that under the order of Barack Obama, that is a legitimate issue in this campaign. How do you expect that to play? And, you know, you've got Iran continuing to be a bad actor. You've also got them further away from a nuclear weapon than they were when the deal started.
This is the question that ought to be debated in the campaign. It's the 10,000-foot question. Clearly, relations with Iran are at some kind of an inflection point. And the question is, does engagement produce, over time, over the next 10 years, a different kind of Iran? Or does it simply produce the same kind of Iran, just with more money in its pocket? You know, obviously Hillary Clinton is going to argue one, and Donald Trump is going to argue the other. You know, is what we're seeing now, and this bad behavior of the Iranians is definitely true in the month since, is that simply a predictable reaction by the hardliners who didn't want the Iranian nuclear deal from their side at all? And is it at the last gasp of the hardline? Or is it a sign that nothing has really changed and nothing will ever change? That's the real question that ought to be discussed.
George, your thoughts? Who's got the better side of this argument? And it's not going to be over the next 10 years. It's going to be over the next 3 months, because that's when voters are going to have to make their judgment.
That's the problem, is that there's no overlap between the electoral cycle and the cycle of policy. The cycle of policy is akin to the policy we had in the Cold War. We're going to hold the line, contain the Soviet Union, and wait for internal regime change. Now, it worked. They did have regime change, and the regime disappeared. We're wagering now that a very different kind of regime, a theocratic regime, can be as pliable and changeable as the Soviet Union was. It's a big wager, and we won't know the answer
But your sense, in 15 seconds, are voters going to take the critics' view of this or the Clinton-Obama view of this?
I don't think it will matter a lot until there's an event. If there's a terrorist event here or a big one abroad, that will change the dynamic of the campaign dramatically.
Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday.